guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode. Welcome back after a good long break. You might be wondering, it has been a while since I've heard from Gavin. What's going on? So yes, the last episode we did was episode number 261 with Jason Greystone, and that was back on the 21st of July. And on the 22nd of July, I got on an airplane, flew to Spain. And I guess you could think of it as a bit of a reset, but I have been doing this podcast now for over 5 years. And in that space of 5 years, this is episode number 262. And I took hardly a single break in that period of time. So I think after 5 years of that, I kind of felt like, you know what, I need a bit of a break away from it. I need to kind of have a think about with the direction that it's going. And I want to come back with some sort of fresh new insights, and I want to come back able to add more value and give more value. And so hopefully that's something that we're going to achieve. And I'll tell you a little bit of the story. Today's episode is going to be about my trip back to Spain, actually. It's all connected, but I'll tie it into the breakaway and everything like that. So what exactly happened? Well, you guys know, I've shared before, the huge financial disaster that was the big project I did in the south of Spain. That was way back in, I first made a commitment to buy this shopping center. I did that in 2006. And then over 2007, I was kind of structuring and assembling the investors and putting it all together. And then in 2008, we went ahead and we purchased the building. Or should I say, we got, as the man would say, you can't get a little bit pregnant. We went and got fully pregnant, and we put down it was about an 8 or 9 million euro deposit. And that deposit, the idea was that was putting down, I think if I'm correct, around about 20% of the money. And the idea was that the bank were going to come in with the other 80%. And anyway, 2008, we all know what happened. Lehman Brothers collapsed, and then the whole deal started to unravel with tenants pulling out. And in addition to tenants pulling out, we had the bank pull out. And when that happened, the whole thing got kind of tied up in a legal battle. Now, in the process of putting that whole deal together, I suddenly realized that this was a huge deal. I mean, 42 million total price. And when you're spending that kind of money, it's not something that you can really realistically do remotely from Ireland, and you're running a project in the south of Spain with all that money tied up. So what did I do? I went and I bought a place in Spain. Now, I already had a holiday apartment, which I've since sold a long time ago, but I do have I bought this villa, and the idea was this would be my home down there while I'm working on this project. And sure enough, moved down to Spain, brought the kids down. My eldest at the time was 4 years of age. That'll give you an idea. She's now just turned 21. And I bought the villa. I think we closed on it in March or May. I can't remember exactly, but it was 2008. And so I don't think it's possible to find a higher point in the market to buy a property. And moved into the property. I can remember pinching myself when I bought this property because it was so beautiful that I was just like, man, I can't believe I own this place. And I was in the pool one day looking up at it just going, Gavin, you're amazing. And sure enough, it wasn't a few years later, the whole thing was in absolute disarray. And the banks back in Ireland went after my family home in Ireland, and so I lost that, and this became my de facto home. And then I got divorced, and the whole thing kind of snowballed into a disaster. I've talked about it before, so I won't bore you on all of that. But the house has been there all this time, and the problem with having a house in the south of Spain is that it's costly to keep it. I have a sizable enough mortgage, and the day I bought it, like the market more or less collapsed from that point onwards. So it has been underwater in terms of value pretty much since the day I bought it. And so when you're in a situation like that, there's some difficult decisions. Do I offload it, sell it at a loss, like pay off the mortgage, just get rid of it? Or do I hold on to it and hope that the market will come back at one point? 17 years on, you would hope it has bounced back. I think there has been a bit of a bounce back, but I'm not sure if I'm in the money yet, but it's at least sort of going in the right direction. But one of the things that I've had to deal with is Spanish law, the landlord and tenant law in Spain is very much skewed in favor of the tenant. You could say the same in Ireland, but I think it's actually even more so the case in Spain. And this is because there's a socialist government in power, and they brought in these laws that make it very, very difficult for a landlord to evict a tenant. And that is still the case. And so when I decided, like I was finding it extraordinarily difficult to maintain the mortgage on the property because I'd moved back to Ireland and my ex-wife had moved back to Ireland and I had to support them. And so most of my income was going into supporting them and I couldn't afford this mortgage back in Spain. And so I had no choice but to put the property on the rental market. And I was nervous about it because there have these long-term leases, a little bit like what we're facing now next March here in Ireland with the 6-year minimum tenancy. And in Spain, I think it's a minimum of 4 years or something like that. And I can remember sort of the tenant that I was signing up, he told me this. He said, there's a minimum of 4 years. You do know that. And I can remember thinking, you actually want it for that long? And he was like, yes, you know, this is not a holiday home. My kids are going to go to the school here and all this. So sure enough, we signed an agreement and he was living in this house for the past 5+ years. And back at the beginning of July, I got a message from him and he was like, Gavin, unfortunately, my wife's father is very unwell. He lives in the north of Spain. And so we are going to have to relocate back to be closer to him. And therefore, I have to give you back this home. And so, sorry for the short notice, but the lease, the 5th year lease of the lease is coming to an end in the middle of July. Let us do a handover then. So sure enough, right after the last episode, I was on the plane the next morning, flew to Spain, met with the tenant, got the keys, and sure enough, the house is now back in my possession. And when you haven't lived in a place for 5 or 6 years, like there's quite a bit of adjustment. First of all, you have to start going around the house and systematically checking things and seeing, is everything still working? Is it all there? And to my annoyance, quite a few things not working, quite a few plants dead, quite a few areas where the systems stopped working and the tenant didn't fix them, didn't tell me about them. And so now I'm dealing with that. So I found myself going around the house for the first week that I was there and realizing, whoa, the sprinkler system doesn't work. And so having to get plumbers to come in and figure out what was wrong. Then, noticing that the pool doesn't seem to be clear. What's going on there? Got a pool guy to come along. He came in and he did all these dips and added all these kind of substances and so tells me that the water is not good and that if this was a municipal swimming pool, it would be shut down. So sure enough, not swimming anymore. And things like that started to kind of dawn on me that, whoa, this all needs to be sorted and it's going to take me quite a couple of weeks to do this. This is not something that I can really do remotely very easily because, guys send you an invoice and say, here, we did the work, and you don't know, have they been to the house and all that. So that's what I've been doing. I was away for 5 weeks in total. I came back to Dublin on the 26th of August. So 22nd of July all the way to the 26th of August. It was a Tuesday to a Tuesday, so exactly 5 weeks. And so I thought, okay, let's get back into the podcast, get back into the swing of things. Honestly, while I was down there, the internet, I didn't have internet in the house. And so I was trying to connect my phone to the computer and upload remotely over the over my, tethering the phone, just doesn't have the bandwidth. And so I couldn't upload videos, couldn't upload anything. I mean, you can barely do a Zoom down there. And so I just decided, you know what, let's just take a break. Let's just ease back for a couple of weeks. I hope I've built up enough goodwill after 5 years of episodes that you guys will forgive a little breakaway from it. So anyway, we're back and we have this this villa, and what am I going to do with it? This is the dilemma that I now face because I was lucky enough to have a tenant that lived there for 5 years and was very, very good at paying the rent. Like, he paid me on time whenever it was required. He actually had it in my bank account before that. So considering what could have happened, like, I heard a lot of nightmare stories where you agree a long-term lease with a guy and then he'll like go into the bathroom and notice that the toilet didn't flush properly. I'm not paying you any rent until that's fixed. And like, that can be the beginning of your long-term tenancy where the guy just stops paying rent anytime there's an issue. And so I've decided that really probably the smarter thing to do is to put it on Airbnb and to actually have a situation where the villa is there. I can actually fly down. I can block some time for myself and my family. We can say we're going to go down during the school holidays. We're going to use it then, block that off, fly down, use our place. And then in the meantime, every other weekend in between that, we can rent it out and we can have, there's the place where it's located. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, you will see some nice imagery that I have of the location, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. I always describe it as kind of like the Beverly Hills of Europe. It really is a beautiful place. And the villa is really, really beautiful. And so I decided that, I could actually pitch this at quite a high level. And there are guys that go down and play golf down there. Like the nearest golf course is Valderrama. And if you're into golf, you'll have heard of Valderrama because the Ryder Cup was held there in 1997. And then there is the San Roque Golf Club. My villa looks out on the San Roque Golf Club. So it's a real mecca for golf. So there's obviously going to be an attraction there for golfers. The other thing that's quite big down there is the sport of kings, polo. And I'm talking about the guys running around with hockey sticks smacking a ball on the top of a horse. Those guys, those are very wealthy patrons that run those teams. And they will have, I don't know how many players, like maybe 10 or 12 players on each team. Each of them has like a couple of horses. And those players are treated like royalty, and they rent them all a villa. So for the month of August, you can actually rent your villa to one of these guys for tens of thousands in some cases. And so it seems like a really interesting thing to do. So I started looking into it, and I thought to myself, anyone else listening to this podcast who's interested in buying foreign property, let's dive into what do you get when, what are the pros and cons of owning overseas property, and what are some of the issues that you have to figure out and resolve and overcome. And so what I've actually thought to do is to actually turn this into kind of an ongoing project. And I'll check in on the podcast here or on the YouTube video every couple of weeks or every month or two, and just give you an update on progress, because it's the kind of thing that I think you might learn from. You might find that it's kind of useful being able to kind of see what the process is from somebody else's eyes before you go and jump in and do it yourself. In addition to this, I'm actually looking at, modifying the house, renovating it, refurbishing it, bringing it up to a slightly higher standard so that I can go after that kind of high-end luxury kind of market. And while it is a really nice house, it is now nearly 20 years since, I think it was built over 20 years ago. And so I'm kind of thinking to myself, probably it needs to be modified or certainly updated a bit. And so I'm actually going to provide you with an ongoing report on that process as well. Like, I don't want to shut the house down and spend a year refurbishing it and then put it on the market. I actually want to collect rent, and then at a period of time, what I'll do is I'll have jobs lined up, like, if we're going to re-tile a bathroom or something, that'll be done over a period of a week or two. and then we'll put it back on the rental market. And that way the house is getting done up, but in the meantime, it's collecting money. And I prefer that to the big job that the income stops completely and then you have to shell out a fortune over that time period. So this is all going to be available. And what I'm actually going to do as well is I'm going to upload some shorter videos into Instagram on a new channel that I'm creating. So you can just see the before and afters and all that kind of stuff. So if you guys are interested to follow along on that stuff, you will find links down in the show notes below. And so let's get on. Now, I have spoken before. I know I did a podcast. I can't remember when it was, but I did a podcast on buying foreign property a couple of years ago and talked about the pros and cons, things like that. And the kind of experience that you'll go through when you buy a property is like the first initial experience that I had back when I bought the place in 2008 was one of exhilaration and like patting myself on the back, you know, feeling really proud of myself, absolutely over the moon that I now own this beautiful villa. But then that can actually wear off, and I'll go through the mixed emotions that I've gone through. Obviously, the happiness, like when you own a place in Spain, like those of you who have young children, if you're bringing them to swimming lessons, you know, once a week or something like that, they will slowly learn to swim. But if you own a pool and your kids can go swimming every single day, they'll be swimming in a couple of weeks. And that's exactly what happened this summer. The 5 weeks that I was down in Spain, my 4-year-old, he started, you know, getting into the pool with floats on his arms and all that kind of stuff. And after only a couple of weeks, he was going under the water and he was like, can I take the floats off? And he started taking them off. And then we were like, he was sinking. So then it was up to him to kind of like develop the strength in his legs and his arms to actually keep his head above water. He started holding his breath. Next minute, he's now swimming, and no swimming lessons at all, just self-taught how to swim in the space of 4 or 5 weeks. Now, I do have a pool guard around the pool, so there's no chance that he could jump in when I'm not there, which any parent will know is the nightmare is that you worry about, you know, is that the kids will go out and go swimming by themselves. So I have it completely guarded, but I remove the guards when I'm getting in, and, you know, we're all diving in and things like that. So it's great. The frustration starts, though, as soon as things break down, because apart from the fact that you have to pay for the thing to be fixed, there is also the language barrier. And if you're trying to get like a local plumber or something like that to come up and do your house, if you know, I'm speaking to an English speaking audience here. Let's say you want the English speaking plumber to do your house. Those are few and far between. And so they're in massive demand. And so you will just not get those guys as often or as quickly as you want. The other thing is they're probably a lot more expensive because they are in demand. And like down in the south of Spain, there is an enormous English speaking sort of expat community, like enormous. And because of that, they all want to hire English speaking people to do their works and to do all this kind of stuff. So very hard to do. If you want to get it done cheaper, more inexpensively and faster, you work with Spanish people. They live locally. They can go and get things done much, much cheaper. And so if you don't speak the language, it can be a lot more difficult. Now, I do speak Spanish, but it's very, like after 5 years of not going to Spain, it's very rusty. So I was using ChatGPT to get the grammar correct on text messages and emails and sending it to them. And then they would send a guy, you know, they'd say, you send an email back saying, yeah, no problem, we'll send a guy up. And then the guy would arrive at the gate and I would have to then try to explain in Spanish, in very poor Spanish, what I needed to get done. So, and then he'd be speaking to me and I'd be trying to kind of like, do I understand exactly what he's saying? Not really. So I'd be saying to, you know, send a message and I'll answer on the message. So anyway, that kind of thing does make it a bit more challenging. And so you have to think about that aspect of it. But, you know, I'm not going to say it's really something that I can complain about. I mean, those of you who are listening are probably saying, oh, boo-hoo, Gavin, like, you know, so you have to, you know, try and figure out how to speak to a local guy to get your villa in Spain fixed, like first world problems here. And it's very true. You know, I'm very, very grateful. I feel very lucky to have this place. So I'm not complaining, but it is a niggle that you have to get these things fixed. Now that I'm back here, I am aware that there's still issues to be done. The pool still needs to be fixed. There's an issue with the pool. And so I have to now email these guys and how am I going to, know that they did the job right? Those kind of things means I'm going to possibly have to fly down and check this stuff out. So all of these things just make it ever so slightly more difficult. And that is why I would just, if you are going to go and fly down and have to kind of sort out these things, make sure it's at least convenient and not too expensive. Like there's a lot of daily flights to Malaga. So from that point of view, it's not too bad. But if you don't have a car down there, you can hire a car inexpensively enough off season. But when it's the middle of the season, it's quite expensive. For me to jump in a taxi to go to my villa is about €160. So it's an expensive taxi ride. So all those things, if you were doing it like every second week or something like that, it would add up pretty quickly. Now, in terms of listing your property on Airbnb, there are a number of challenges that we have to talk about as well. And before we actually get into the individual forms and various things that you have to do, we also have to look at what's going on in Spain, specifically Spain. There is actually a bit of an anti-tourism backlash taking place in some sectors of the market. And Malaga is one. Barcelona is another, and I understand Lanzarote is experiencing this as well. And what it is that there is just so much tourism going on, so many flights a day, so many thousands of tourists arriving into these locations that there aren't enough hotels. And because there aren't enough hotels, the Airbnb side of things has become very, very popular. And it's become so popular that everyone has started to do it. And because it's become so popular and everyone's starting to do it, what it is doing is it's pushing the locals out of their own communities. A local will say, a plumber, one of the guys that I was hiring, let's say one of those local guys living in a small house in Malaga or something like that, or a 2-bedroom apartment or whatever, those guys might be paying $600-700 a month, maybe $800 a month in rent to their landlord, and they can survive on that. But now that Airbnb is here, the landlord can actually get maybe $100 a day in order to just rent the property out to tourists that are flying in. And so what does that do? Well, that means that the locals are priced out of the market. And so they're very unhappy about that. Now, in addition to the actual people looking for property, what it also does is it kind of ruins the local community atmosphere, because if there are no longer locals living in the houses, then what happens to the school? The school kind of like empties out. If there are no locals living in the houses, then the local businesses don't do as well, because the tourists aren't really there to do local business. They're there to go to the bars and the restaurants, and that's about it. But the hardware store and all that kind of stuff, those guys don't do very well. So all of this has made it a bit of a political hot potato. And what is happening is there is suddenly this kind of backlash, and there are protests. Now, the protests are interesting. They're not marching on the streets. What you have is they're going around with water pistols, and they are spraying water at tourists. And so you're sitting in a cafe. Now, it hasn't happened to me, I should say, but I've seen this and I've heard about this, is that tourists sitting in a cafe minding their own business are suddenly getting sprayed with water by these protests. And it is a way of saying, stop coming here and taking over our towns. We want our towns back. So in the same way, I guess, as here in our home country here in Ireland, we're looking at a lot of refugees that are being placed in accommodation in certain towns and villages. And that is causing a lot of upset with the locals. This is something similar, but we are the people that are kind of like being put into these towns, and we are the ones that are not wanted. And so what has this done? Well, this has meant that issuing of Airbnb licenses, it used to be that you could just list your property on Airbnb. Not anymore. You need to have a special number. The number is called, and it's a Spanish acronym, so it's an NRUA, and what it essentially means is a unique rental registration number. So you need to have that. And that basically means that anything that you earn is recorded and captured. And so you have to pay tax on that, on the property. Now, in addition to that, if you want to actually put your property in the rental market, on like listed on platforms like Airbnb, you need to register with the National Registry of Tourist Accommodation as well. So those are 2 registrations that you have to do. And in order to go through all that, these go through the local town hall and stuff. But since there's this backlash going on, I've heard that it's not guaranteed that your property will actually be sanctioned or approved. And so you could find that even though you want to list your property on Airbnb, you haven't been given the number, and so you're not allowed. Now, it's not to stop you from renting. You can still go and rent your property to people who want it. You just can't use the online platforms. And so what it means is you have to go and use the traditional way of going to an estate agent in that area and saying, I'd like you to list my property. And it doesn't put as much control in your hands. Like, if I'm on Airbnb, I actually am getting the messages. I'm the one who's answering to the people. I can answer and ask the questions and things like that. That's not possible if you're going through an agent, because the agent will do all of that stuff for you. So all of these protests, it obviously has meant that you can imagine the local politicians that are in the town hall saying, should we grant, all these Airbnb licenses? Probably not, because it's maybe going to result in us not getting elected back into the local government. And so that is one of the issues that we're facing. And I haven't actually submitted my own license yet. And I'll be giving you an update on how that is going. I have a guy that, there's a thing in Spain that you need in order to do registrations online and stuff. And it's a digital certificate. And my accountant has my digital certificate on his system. So he can submit all the documentation for me and all that kind of stuff. So that is the next step that I'm going to be going through. And I'll give you guys an update on how it goes. But those of you who are interested in just what the property looks like and all that kind of stuff, I'll put a couple of images up on the screen there. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to just sort of see what I'm talking about. I'm doing a bit of a walkthrough on the property, and you can kind of see. And that's it, guys. So look, that's we've been off for how many weeks now? Six weeks. I'm going to be bringing some guests back in the next week, and I'll be bringing people in. But before I break away and say goodnight to you all, what I'm going to do is just quickly go into what's happened in tourism, mass tourism in general. I mentioned that Barcelona and Lanzarote are going through this as well. And it's I was in Spain as a very young child. My parents went on a package holiday, before package holidays were a thing. If you wanted to go away, you had to go and do all of this stuff. You had to organize flights and stuff, and you didn't have the internet. So it was quite a difficult thing to do. And then back in the 1970s, they brought in package holidays. And all of a sudden you were able to buy a holiday and just travel down to Spain and stuff. And this is when Spain started to see this tourism rise. And I remember going on this holiday when I was about, I think, if I'm correct, I was probably 4 or 5. So it's a very early memory. And I do remember the swimming pool, and I remember a lot of details like that. But what I remember most was we were in Torremolinos. Now, Torremolinos nowadays is this big place, and a lot of cheap package holidays would end up going to Torremolinos. Back in those days, Torremolinos was kind of like, it was a new destination that people were going to. So it's quite different to how it is perceived today. And I remember going to this hotel and going out on the streets and it being almost like a fishing village. Like it wasn't built up the way you see it now. And places like Benalmádena, that was a little village as well. And then as you go down the coast, there was villages. Now it's kind of expanded to the point where it's just one huge big urban sprawl that runs all the way down the coast. But Marbella and Puerto Banús, they were actually separated by miles. And it's quite amazing. I was in Puerto Banús. Those of you who've been into Puerto Banús before, Puerto Banús was this fishing village that suddenly became very fashionable, and they put a marina in there, and movie stars like Sean Connery used to go to it. And so it was very, very popular all of a sudden with the jet set. And I remember being there in 1988 when I was 16 years of age. And I remember, it was the first time I ever saw a Ferrari. There was a lot of wealth back then as well. But I can remember, those of you who are familiar with the area, Puerto Banús, there's a big Corte Inglés shopping centre, and there's a big kind of an outdoor area behind the port. That was all sand as far as the eye could see. It was just like parking lots, open parking lots. There was nothing there. There was no apartment buildings. There was nothing. It was just the port itself and nothing else. And today you go there and it's just completely built up for miles. So fascinating to see how it's grown and how it's expanded. And one of the reasons why I picked the area that I have my place, it's a place called Soto Grande. The reason that I picked that area is because it is not built up. It is actually still very much like lots of villas and lots of, green and a very, very leafy kind of estate. It feels a little bit like Beverly Hills or something like that. If you're watching the video, you'll see some of the images that I'm talking about. But in those 30 years, let's say the last 30 to 40 years, population growth has been extraordinary on the planet Earth. If you go back to the 1970s, the planet's population was only 4 billion. Today, it is 7 billion. So 3 billion additional people are now on the planet that were not there before. And so that is where this tourism boom is coming from. You also have companies like EasyJet, Ryanair, all of these low-fare airlines, those have come along and those have made it possible to jump on a flight for 20 euro. And I remember in 1980 something, I remember to fly to London was £500, Irish pounds. And people were doing, it was only business people that could afford to go to London. And nowadays you can just jump on a flight for 60 euro or 50 euro, whatever it is. So because of this, mass tourism has turned into a thing. You go to Paris or you go to Rome or you go to any of these big cities and it's just mobbed with people. If you go back 30 years, you went to see the Eiffel Tower or the Vatican in Rome or any of those places, there was not the crowds. You could just walk into these places. Today, you're queuing for hours. And so that is part of what is creating this problem. This is just population growth over that period of time. So this is most definitely impacting locals. It's impacting house prices. And if you're living here in Ireland with me, you know that this property housing crisis that we're in is pretty much all that they're talking about. It's a very emotive topic. And because of that, it is politically sensitive. And because of that, everyone's talking about it. It's in the media. And so the politicians have to take it serious. And that is what's going on in Spain. So I do think you're going to find that it's going to be probably difficult enough to rent this place out. I may find that there's some pushback. And so I'll be updating you guys and letting you know how it all goes. And I hope you found this first episode back after a break good. If you have any questions, anything at all, drop me a line. My messages are down below. Final thing I'll say is I have an event coming up on the beginning of October. It's my member-only investor summit. It's if you're interested in being at that summit, if you're interested in joining the mentorship, the accelerator, just reach out. I'll put some links down below so that you can find that and book a call with me or one of my colleagues, and we will have you in the program and we'll see you and we'll meet you on the day. There's going to be lunch, there's going to be speakers, there's going to be all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be great. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care.